Right now, Max Verstappen's future with Red Bull hangs by a thread, and every sign on the horizon suggests Aston Martin is poised to take full advantage of the storm brewing in Milton Keynes. The Silverstone-based squad might be stumbling towards the end of the ground effect era, but they've got their gaze fixed far beyond the current turbulence. They're already plotting a bold leap into 2026, a year they believe could redefine their place in Formula One. Behind the scenes, there's a surge of confidence, a long-term strategy being quietly but powerfully sculpted, and at the center of it all is Max. Concrete proposals have reportedly been floated toward the reigning world champion, or should we say former champion in spirit, given the mess that unfolded in Bahrain. That disaster of a Grand Prix wasn't just a poor performance, it felt like a warning shot. And if you're Max Verstappen, it becomes harder and harder to ignore when a team like Aston Martin, with real ambition and financial muscle, offers a chance to start fresh. A chance to once again drive a machine capable of absolute dominance. But here's where it gets even more fascinating. Could Aston Martin truly become a title-challenging force with Verstappen at the wheel? And more provocatively, would Lawrence Stroll have the nerve, the cold-blooded steel, to bench his own son Lance to make room for Max? It sounds ruthless. It is ruthless. But in this sport, ambition doesn't care about family ties. If Lawrence is dead serious about leading Aston Martin into a new golden era, there's a growing sense that even blood won't stand in the way. While all of this brews on the outside, something even more explosive has been simmering, then erupting, inside Red Bull's own garage. Over the Bahrain weekend, emotions reached a boiling point. After a lackluster showing on track, Max's manager, Raymond Vermeulen, completely lost his cool. According to Sky Sports' Ted Kravitz, Vermeulen stormed into the Red Bull garage and delivered a blistering verbal tirade straight into the face of none other than Helmut Marko. Yes, that Helmut Marko. The architect of the Red Bull driver pipeline. The man who rarely hears criticism and almost never in public. Ted Kravitz described the situation as nothing short of chaos. Vermeulen barged into the garage, confronted Marko directly, and unleashed what sounded like a full-on verbal thrashing. No filters, no restraint. Then, as if security had revoked his pass on the spot, he stormed out, leaving behind a stunned silence. The outburst wasn't just the symptom of a bad weekend. It was the climax of frustration that had been mounting for weeks. And it laid bare what many have been whispering behind the scenes, that Red Bull's RB21 isn't just underperforming, it's fundamentally flawed. Deep-rooted issues are plaguing the car, potentially embedded in its very architecture. After the race, Red Bull's top brass was forced to convene an emergency meeting in a desperate attempt to patch up a sinking ship. But the feeling in the paddock is that these aren't problems you can fix with a couple of tweaks and a new floor. Insiders fear the team may be vastly overestimating their development pace, and worse, underestimating just how far behind they're slipping. After Bahrain, the energy within Max's camp was somber, borderline defeated. Vermeulen's fury wasn't just anger, it was fear. Fear that the ship is off course, and no one's at the helm. Even Helmut Marko himself is beginning to sound rattled. For the first time, he openly acknowledged the real possibility that Verstappen might walk, to a direct rival no less, like Mercedes or Aston Martin. His tone carried an urgency that Red Bull fans haven't heard in years. "We need to give Max a car that can win again," he admitted. "We have to rebuild a competitive foundation, and we simply cannot afford to be failing on basic operations like pit stops. If the car's not the fastest and we're screwing up strategy too, that's inexcusable." The cracks are visible everywhere. And Max isn't even trying to hide his emotional distance anymore. In interviews, he's adopted a tone that feels eerily robotic, cold, detached, almost as if he's already begun the mental separation. When speaking about the championship battle, he no longer includes Red Bull in the conversation. In fact, he even brushed off McLaren as a direct competitor, not out of disrespect, but perhaps because his gaze is already directed somewhere else. Somewhere greener. Somewhere more stable. It was the first race weekend since Las Vegas where both Red Bull cars scored points. And yet, The vibe was anything but celebratory. No smiles, no champagne-soaked relief. Just a team staring into a mirror and seeing something unfamiliar: doubt. Max summed it up in his own haunting way. "I always try to give everything, even when the results don't come. That's the path we're on. Whether it's a disappointment or a frustrating weekend, I keep pushing, we keep talking, and we try to move forward. But we know there are core issues here. Winning a race won't fix that." And there it is. You don't need to be a psychologist to hear the message buried in those words. Max Verstappen, once the unstoppable machine of Red Bull's golden age, now sounds like a man clocking in at a job he no longer believes in. And if Lawrence Stroll can see that, you can bet he's already got the contract drafted. The question isn't whether Max will leave Red Bull. It's when. And where he'll go. In many ways, that quote encapsulates the essence of what's currently unraveling at Red Bull. A team struggling to keep its head above water while its most prized asset, Max Verstappen, quietly eyes the exit. Whether those fractures can be mended or whether a full-blown split is looming just beyond the horizon remains uncertain. But one thing is undeniable: the once mighty alliance between Verstappen and Red Bull has entered its most delicate and precarious chapter yet. As I pointed out last week, I'm not someone who lets emotional swings take control. Whether things are going brilliantly or crumbling around me, I don't allow those highs and lows to shape my mindset. I aim to stay grounded, level-headed, and forward-focused regardless of what the moment throws at me. But that stoic mentality, as admirable as it is beginning to clash with the ever-volatile politics of Formula One, a sport where loyalty is often outpaced by ambition, and the scenery can shift in a matter of hours. Nowhere is that tension more apparent than in Silverstone, where Aston Martin is making its intentions crystal clear. They're not hiding in the shadows. On the contrary, they've been actively maneuvering behind the scenes, laying the groundwork for a future centered around Verstappen. And according to several internal leaks, securing Max has become their top strategic priority for the years to come. This isn't a casual flirtation, it's a calculated campaign. None of it is coincidental. You can't ignore the pieces being moved into place. The recruitment of Adrian Newey, the godfather of modern F1 aerodynamics, coupled with the high-profile announcement of Honda as their exclusive power unit supplier from 2026 onward, aren't just bold moves, they're declarations of war. Aston Martin isn't just building a car, they're constructing a fortress. And they've made it abundantly clear who they want sitting on the throne inside it: Max Verstappen. From Max's perspective, the writing on the wall is getting harder and harder to ignore. More than ever before, he seems to understand just how central Newey was to Red Bull's reign. Sure, people like Rob Marshall also made crucial contributions, but the general consensus in the paddock is clear. Newey was the architect of Red Bull's dominance, the mastermind behind the machinery. Watching him drift away from the team has likely forced Max to reassess everything. You can feel the atmosphere shifting. But the intrigue doesn't stop there. There's another wild card quietly gaining momentum: Honda. As they prepare their return to Formula One in full force through their partnership with Aston Martin, they haven't ruled out playing a major role in shaping the team's driver lineup. In fact, they're already nudging the door open. Koji Watanabe, Honda's president, has openly suggested that the company intends to maintain a similar level of influence in driver decisions as it did during its years with Red Bull, and he hasn't been shy about expressing his desire to reunite with Verstappen. "We've had many constructive conversations," Watanabe revealed in a recent interview. "His way of communicating with our engineers is absolutely unmatched, clear, efficient, and deeply motivating." That kind of synergy turned many of our brightest minds into die-hard fans of Max. He inspires them, and that's no secret. The clock is ticking, and the number of prime seats for 2026 is shrinking rapidly. Although Aston Martin will ultimately decide who races for them, Honda is pushing hard to have a significant voice in the matter. That could very well shift the balance of internal power within the team, especially if Verstappen signals any interest in reigniting that past relationship. And so far, he hasn't ruled anything out. When asked about what's next, Max gave a response that was short, cryptic, and yet profoundly telling. "I'm still young. You never really know what's around the corner. I never expected to win 4 titles with a team that, at one point, felt like a distant dream. So whatever comes next, we'll see." That sentence hit like a thunderclap in the paddock. It may have sounded like a vague shrug, but in Formula One, where every word is measured, every syllable scrutinized, it spoke volumes. The implications are seismic. For Red Bull, it means their grip on the sport's biggest star is weakening. For Aston Martin and Honda, it's a green light to keep pushing harder. And for Max, it means the doors are open. All of them. And he's taking his time deciding which one to walk through. If Max Verstappen is truly reassessing his long-term future in Formula One, then Aston Martin may be staring at the opportunity of a lifetime, but with it comes a monumental dilemma. Because if Max decides to commit to the Silverstone-based outfit, the inevitable question arises: who steps aside? The obvious answer, on paper, would be Fernando Alonso. The Spaniard, now in the twilight of his career, is widely expected to call time on his F1 journey after 2026. That timeline would create a natural opening, a graceful and logical exit for one legend to make room for another. But Formula One is rarely that tidy. In fact, the complications go far beyond Alonso. Enter Lawrence Stroll. Despite technically being responsible for 100% of Aston Martin's points in the 2025 season so far, Stroll's performances have left much to be desired. His form has oscillated between flashes of competence and stretches of mediocrity. Critics argue that he's plateaued, or worse, regressed, over the past 2 seasons. He hasn't made that leap into elite territory. But therein lies the real challenge. This isn't just any driver. This is the owner's son. Lawrence Stroll didn't just invest in Aston Martin. He built an empire around the vision of turning Lance into a world champion. Every major capital investment, every personnel overhaul, every strategic realignment, it's all been executed with Lance as the central pillar. That's not the kind of structure you casually dismantle. And yet, if Max Verstappen becomes a realistic signing, it flips the entire equation. When a generational talent like Max knocks on your door, you don't just open it. You tear the house down and build a new one around him. Verstappen has proven time and again that he can outperform machinery, extract pace from nothing, and carry a team on his back through chaos. Lance, in contrast, has never operated under that kind of pressure. He's never had to fight for his seat. Regardless of results, his position has always been secure. But that could all change in an instant if Max shows up in green. And that, right there, is the pressure cooker Aston Martin finds itself in. The team is preparing for a future that could either elevate them to true championship contention or collapse under the weight of internal contradiction. They're aligning the right partnerships, overhauling their engine program, investing in elite minds, and trying to redefine their identity. But none of that matters if the driver at the heart of it all isn't capable of delivering titles. And right now, Max Verstappen is the only available driver on the grid who can single-handedly transform a team. Yes, he remains under contract with Red Bull, but the emotional ties are fraying. When a team like Aston Martin is prepared to hand him the keys to an empire, that kind of offer becomes hard to ignore. There's an increasing sense in the paddock that if current trajectories continue, a chasm will open between Aston's 2 drivers. That disparity won't just affect lap times. It could trigger a ripple effect across the organization. It may influence Honda's internal politics, the strategic vision of senior partners, and even how Adrian Newey's role evolves. Because make no mistake, Newey isn't just a hired hand. He's a titan. And his voice, especially when it comes to driver selection, could carry more weight than many initially thought. At the core of this high-stakes chess game lies a singular ambition: convince Max Verstappen that Aston Martin is his future. Everything Aston Martin is doing, from poaching Newey to partnering exclusively with Honda from 2026, appears to be part of a calculated campaign to prove their commitment to excellence. They're not just offering Max a fast car. They're offering him an entire ecosystem built to maximize his dominance. This blueprint mirrors the very strategy Lawrence Stroll used to lure Adrian Newey in the first place. Now, all eyes turn to Max. Former F1 driver Juan Pablo Montoya recently shed some light on what's unfolding behind the curtains. According to him, Aston Martin isn't just considering making an offer to Max, they've already made up their minds. "I think Max is going to receive an offer from Aston that'll be almost impossible to refuse," Montoya said in a recent interview. "Maybe he gives Red Bull one more year, a final shot. But the pull from Aston Martin is strong." Still, Montoya warns of patience. Even with Newey, even with Honda engines, even with all this investment, success doesn't happen overnight. They'll be stronger next year, no doubt. But I don't see them winning races right away. This is a long-term vision. Max has to decide if he has the time or the appetite for that. And while Aston Martin is preparing for liftoff, storm clouds are gathering at Red Bull. The concerns that once echoed in hushed tones have now become open conversations. Political unrest, shaky leadership, and declining performance have eroded the image of Red Bull as a juggernaut. Suddenly, the team that once looked untouchable now seems mortal. Meanwhile, Mercedes watches quietly from the shadows. While Toto Wolff publicly backs George Russell and continues to develop young phenom Andrea Kimi Antonelli, he's no romantic. Opportunities to land a driver like Max don't come around twice. The last time, he missed the chance. This time, no one expects him to hesitate. Sky F1 veteran Martin Brundle put it bluntly. If Max ever hits the open market, George Russell should be very nervous. Kimi may be Toto's golden child, his long-term investment. But there are still questions. George is doing a solid job, no doubt. But if Toto sees a window to sign Verstappen, he's taking it. He's not making the same mistake twice. That hypothetical, that what if, is now driving most of the conversations around the paddock. What if Max leaves Red Bull? What if Aston Martin emerges as the new dominant force? What if Mercedes throws everything at him to make him the face of their post-Hamilton era? And finally, the question no one can answer. If Max chooses Aston Martin, who gets the axe? Logically, Alonso seems the obvious choice. His age, the whispers about 2026 being his farewell, it all adds up. That would allow Aston to make room for Max with dignity and class. But Formula One isn't played on spreadsheets. Lance Stroll's situation is far messier. He's the son of the owner, yes. But he's also a driver whose recent performances have been unconvincing. While statistics offer convenient protection, they don't tell the whole story. His form over the past 2 seasons has sparked genuine concern. Critics have described his racecraft as inconsistent at best, reckless at worst. Yet in many ways, this is still Lance's team. Lawrence Stroll has spent hundreds of millions transforming Aston Martin into a serious player, with his son at the center of the plan. Every facility upgrade, every strategic pivot, every bold hiring decision, it was all built around Lance. That's a tough habit to break, even for someone as pragmatic as Lawrence. But here's the cold reality. If Max Verstappen becomes available, all bets are off. Everything gets reassessed. Even Lance. Because Max isn't just another quick driver. He's a game changer. A rare force of nature who can drag a car beyond its limits, inspire engineers to work around the clock, and make sponsors open their checkbooks with zero hesitation. You don't say no to Max Verstappen. You make space. So, what's going to happen? Will Max walk away from the team that turned him into a legend? Will Aston Martin finally rise to superpower status? And if that happens, who pays the price? Is it Alonso? Or is it Stroll? Let us know what you think in the comments below. And once you've shared your take, Make sure to click on the video on your screen right now to see how this unfolding drama could rewrite the entire future of Formula One.